What if the vitamin D supplement sitting in your medicine cabinet, the one you've been taking faithfully because you know it's supposed to support your bones, is actually being taken in a way that meaningfully limits how much of it your body can genuinely use? Most people over 50 have gotten the message that vitamin D matters, particularly for bone health, and many have started taking a supplement in response. But simply taking a vitamin D supplement and taking it in a way that your body can actually absorb and use effectively are two genuinely different things, and several common, easy-to-make mistakes can significantly reduce how much benefit you're actually getting, even while faithfully taking your supplement every single day. So today we're going to walk through the specific mistakes that commonly undermine vitamin D supplementation after 50, why each one matters for bone health specifically, and exactly how to correct your approach so the vitamin D you're taking actually does what you're taking it for. Before we begin, remember this video is for education only. If you're taking vitamin D supplements, particularly at higher doses, or have any kidney condition, please speak with your doctor about the appropriate dose and monitoring for your individual situation, since vitamin D, unlike some other vitamins, can reach genuinely harmful levels if taken inappropriately. Now, let's begin. Most people ask, how much vitamin D should I take? But dosage, while genuinely important, is actually just one piece of a considerably larger picture, and focusing on dosage alone while overlooking several other factors can mean even a technically appropriate dose fails to produce the bone health benefit you're actually hoping for. The better question is, am I taking vitamin D in a way that supports its actual absorption and its function within my body, or am I simply taking a pill without considering the several other factors that determine whether it's genuinely working? Because vitamin D's journey from a swallowed capsule to genuinely supporting your bone density involves several distinct steps, and a mistake at any one of these steps can meaningfully undermine the entire process, regardless of how consistently you're taking your supplement. Here is why getting this right matters so much more after 50 specifically. Vitamin D's role in calcium absorption becomes increasingly important as bone density naturally declines with age, particularly accelerated for many women during and after menopause. Your skin's natural capacity to produce vitamin D from sun exposure declines with age, meaning many adults over 50 rely more heavily on dietary sources and supplementation to meet their needs compared to earlier decades when sun exposure alone may have provided more adequate levels. And kidney function, which plays a role in converting vitamin D into its active form, can also shift somewhat with age, adding another layer of relevance to understanding exactly how vitamin D functions within your body, rather than simply assuming any supplement taken consistently will automatically produce the intended bone health benefit. Think of vitamin D supplementation like planting a seed in your garden. Simply purchasing quality seeds and placing them somewhere in your yard doesn't guarantee a thriving garden. The seeds need appropriate soil conditions, adequate water, proper sunlight, and the right timing to actually germinate and grow into something genuinely beneficial. Vitamin D works in a remarkably similar way, requiring several specific supporting conditions, absorption factors, cofactor nutrients, and appropriate dosing, to actually translate from a swallowed capsule into genuine, measurable bone health benefit, rather than simply passing through your system with minimal actual impact. Let's start with the first common mistake: taking vitamin D on an empty stomach without any accompanying dietary fat. Vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin, meaning your body requires the presence of dietary fat to properly absorb it from your digestive tract into your bloodstream, a fundamentally different absorption process compared to water-soluble vitamins like vitamin C, which don't carry this same requirement. Taking a vitamin D supplement on a completely empty stomach, without any accompanying fat, can meaningfully reduce how much of that vitamin D actually gets absorbed, meaning you could be taking a technically adequate dose while your body absorbs only a fraction of what you intended. The fix involves taking your vitamin D supplement alongside a meal that includes some source of healthy fat, such as eggs, avocado, nuts, or a meal cooked with olive oil, rather than taking it on its own, first thing in the morning before eating, or with a completely fat-free meal. The second common mistake involves taking vitamin D without adequate magnesium, a mineral that plays a genuinely essential, if often overlooked, role in vitamin D metabolism specifically. Magnesium is required as a cofactor for the enzymes responsible for converting vitamin D into its active form within your body, meaning inadequate magnesium levels can meaningfully limit how effectively your body is able to actually use the vitamin D you're supplementing with, regardless of the dose. Many adults over 50 have suboptimal magnesium intake, since magnesium-rich foods, including leafy greens, nuts, seeds, and whole grains, aren't always consistently emphasized in typical dietary patterns, meaning this particular gap can genuinely undermine vitamin D supplementation without the connection being obvious to most people taking a vitamin D supplement without any specific attention to their magnesium intake. The fix involves ensuring adequate magnesium intake through diet, foods like almonds, spinach, pumpkin seeds, and black beans, or discussing magnesium supplementation specifically with your doctor if your dietary intake is genuinely inadequate, rather than assuming vitamin D supplementation alone, without attention to this specific cofactor, will automatically produce optimal results. The third common mistake involves inconsistent, sporadic dosing rather than a genuinely consistent daily or otherwise regular pattern. Vitamin D, once absorbed, is stored in your body's fat tissue and released gradually over time, meaning your blood levels respond more meaningfully to consistent, ongoing intake over weeks and months than to occasional, irregular dosing, even if the irregular pattern technically adds up to a similar total amount over a longer period. Many people fall into a pattern of taking their supplement consistently for a period, then forgetting for several days or weeks, then resuming, a pattern that tends to produce considerably more fluctuating, less optimal blood levels compared to genuinely consistent daily intake. The fix involves building vitamin D into an established daily routine, ideally alongside another consistent daily habit, such as a specific meal, to help ensure this consistency, rather than relying on remembering it as an isolated, easily forgotten task. The fourth common mistake involves taking an inappropriate dose without ever having your actual blood levels tested, meaning you're essentially guessing at whether your particular dose is genuinely appropriate for your individual body, rather than basing your supplementation on actual, measured information about your current vitamin D status. Vitamin D needs vary considerably between individuals based on factors including body weight, skin tone, geographic location, typical sun exposure, and individual absorption efficiency, meaning a standard, generic dose that works well for one person may be genuinely insufficient or, in some cases, excessive for another person with different individual factors. A simple blood test, specifically measuring 25-hydroxyvitamin D, the primary circulating form used to assess vitamin D status, provides genuine, individualized information about whether your current supplementation approach is producing adequate blood levels, information considerably more reliable than assuming a standard dose is automatically appropriate for your specific situation. The fix involves discussing vitamin D testing with your doctor, ideally establishing a baseline measurement before beginning or significantly changing your supplementation approach, then retesting after a few months to confirm your specific dose is genuinely achieving an appropriate blood level for your individual needs. The fifth common mistake, and one that deserves particular attention given the genuine risk involved, is significantly exceeding recommended doses based on the assumption that more vitamin D automatically produces proportionally greater bone health benefit. Unlike water-soluble vitamins, which are generally excreted relatively efficiently when consumed in excess, vitamin D is fat-soluble and can accumulate to genuinely harmful levels if taken in significantly excessive doses over an extended period, a condition called vitamin D toxicity, which can actually paradoxically harm bone health by causing excessive calcium absorption, leading to elevated blood calcium levels that can affect kidney function and, notably, can actually contribute to calcium being pulled from bones in certain circumstances, directly counter to the intended bone-supporting goal. This risk is specifically relevant for anyone taking significantly higher doses than generally recommended without medical supervision and blood level monitoring, rather than a concern for anyone taking a standard, moderate dose as typically recommended for general supplementation. The fix involves working with your doctor to determine an appropriate dose based on your actual blood levels and individual needs, rather than assuming a significantly higher dose than recommended must be more beneficial, and having your blood levels periodically monitored if you are taking a higher, medically supervised dose for a specific reason, such as correcting a diagnosed deficiency. Now let's talk about the sixth common mistake, and this one involves calcium intake specifically, since vitamin D and calcium function together as closely interconnected partners in supporting bone health, rather than vitamin D working independently on its own. Vitamin D's primary bone-related function involves supporting calcium absorption from your digestive tract, meaning adequate vitamin D without adequate dietary calcium intake means your body has improved absorption capacity but insufficient calcium actually available to absorb, limiting the practical bone health benefit even with technically adequate vitamin D levels. This works in the reverse direction as well, meaning adequate calcium intake without adequate vitamin D means that calcium isn't being absorbed as efficiently as it could be, regardless of how much calcium-rich food you're consuming. The fix involves ensuring both nutrients are being addressed together, through a combination of calcium-rich foods like dairy, fortified plant milks, or leafy greens, alongside your vitamin D supplementation, rather than focusing on one of these two closely interconnected nutrients while overlooking the other. Now let's talk about the seventh and final common mistake, and this one involves a genuinely more nuanced, less definitively settled area, the question of vitamin K2 specifically, which has received considerable attention in more recent nutrition discussions regarding its potential role alongside vitamin D. Some research suggests vitamin K2 plays a role in directing calcium specifically toward bone tissue rather than allowing it to accumulate in blood vessels or soft tissue, theoretically complementing vitamin D's role in calcium absorption by helping ensure that absorbed calcium is directed toward genuinely beneficial locations within the body. It's worth being honest that this remains a genuinely evolving, less definitively established area of research compared to the more well-established mistakes already discussed, meaning vitamin K2 supplementation represents a reasonable consideration worth discussing with your doctor, particularly if you're taking a higher dose of vitamin D, but it shouldn't be considered as firmly established or as universally necessary as the other factors discussed throughout this video. An important distinction worth maintaining rather than treating every commonly discussed supplement pairing as equally, definitively proven. Now, before we go further, let's debunk a few common myths about vitamin D supplementation specifically. For years, many people believed that any vitamin D supplement, taken consistently, automatically produces adequate blood levels and bone health benefit regardless of how it's taken or what else is happening in the body. Some believe that more vitamin D always produces proportionally greater benefit, without recognizing the genuine toxicity risk associated with significantly excessive doses. Some believe that vitamin D works entirely independently, without needing to consider its close functional relationship with calcium, magnesium, and potentially vitamin K2. And some believe that blood level testing is an unnecessary, overly medical step for something as seemingly simple as taking a vitamin supplement. But when we look at the actual physiology involved, the picture becomes considerably more nuanced and considerably more actionable. The real questions are not simply, am I taking a vitamin D supplement, or have I always assumed this alone is sufficient? The better questions are, am I taking it alongside dietary fat to support absorption? Is my magnesium intake adequate to support proper vitamin D metabolism? Am I taking it consistently, rather than sporadically? Have I actually had my blood levels tested to confirm my dose is appropriate for my individual needs? Am I taking a reasonable, medically appropriate dose rather than assuming significantly more must be better? And am I ensuring adequate calcium intake alongside my vitamin D, recognizing these nutrients work together rather than independently? Now let's build a simple, practical framework for correcting these common mistakes starting with your very next dose. First, take your vitamin D supplement alongside a meal that includes some dietary fat, rather than on an empty stomach or with a fat-free meal. Second, ensure adequate magnesium intake through diet or, if needed, discuss magnesium supplementation with your doctor, recognizing its role as a necessary cofactor for vitamin D metabolism. Third, build consistent, daily supplementation into an established routine, rather than relying on sporadic, easily forgotten dosing. Fourth, discuss vitamin D blood level testing with your doctor, ideally establishing a baseline and retesting periodically to confirm your specific dose is producing appropriate levels for your individual situation. Fifth, avoid significantly exceeding recommended doses without medical supervision and blood level monitoring, recognizing the genuine toxicity risk associated with excessive, unsupervised high-dose supplementation. Sixth, ensure adequate calcium intake alongside your vitamin D supplementation, recognizing these two nutrients function together rather than independently. Seventh, discuss vitamin K2 with your doctor as a reasonable, if less definitively established, consideration worth exploring, particularly if you're taking a higher vitamin D dose specifically. Let's talk a bit more about the specific blood test involved in checking vitamin D status, since understanding what the results actually mean can help you have a more informed, productive conversation with your doctor. The 25-hydroxyvitamin D blood test is generally considered the most reliable measure of your body's actual vitamin D status, reflecting both what you've obtained through sun exposure and dietary or supplemental sources combined. General reference ranges typically suggest levels below 20 nanograms per milliliter indicate deficiency, levels between 20 and 30 nanograms per milliliter are sometimes considered insufficient by some guidelines, and levels above 30 nanograms per milliliter are generally considered sufficient, though specific target ranges and their clinical significance continue to be debated somewhat among different medical organizations and researchers, meaning your doctor's specific interpretation and recommendation for your individual situation carries more direct relevance than any single, generic reference range discussed in a general video. It's also worth addressing sun exposure specifically, since supplementation isn't the only relevant source of vitamin D, and understanding how sun exposure factors into your overall vitamin D status provides useful additional context. As discussed in other conversations about morning routines, brief, regular sun exposure, generally 10 to 15 minutes several times weekly when weather and season allow, contributes meaningfully to your body's natural vitamin D production, though this capacity does decline somewhat with age, as mentioned earlier, and varies considerably based on your geographic latitude, the season, time of day, and how much of your skin is exposed during that sun exposure. For many adults over 50, particularly those living in more northern latitudes or with limited regular outdoor time, supplementation genuinely serves as a necessary complement to whatever natural sun exposure they're able to obtain, rather than either sun exposure or supplementation alone typically providing fully adequate levels on its own throughout an entire year, particularly during winter months in many regions. Let's talk briefly about medication interactions specifically, since several medications commonly used after 50 can genuinely interact with vitamin D metabolism or absorption in ways worth understanding. Certain cholesterol-lowering medications and weight loss medications that work by reducing fat absorption can, as a side effect of their intended mechanism, also reduce absorption of fat-soluble vitamins including vitamin D, since these medications don't specifically distinguish between dietary fat you're trying to limit and the fat-soluble vitamins that require fat for proper absorption. Additionally, certain seizure medications and steroid medications can affect vitamin D metabolism through other mechanisms, potentially increasing an individual's vitamin D needs beyond what standard general population recommendations would suggest. If you're taking any of these types of medications regularly, mentioning this specifically to your doctor when discussing vitamin D supplementation and blood level testing provides important, individually relevant context that a general video like this one simply cannot account for on its own. It's also worth addressing seasonal variation specifically, since your vitamin D needs and appropriate supplementation approach may genuinely shift somewhat between summer and winter months, particularly relevant for anyone living in a region with meaningfully reduced sun exposure during colder months. Some people find that their blood levels, when tested at different points throughout the year, show meaningful seasonal variation, generally somewhat higher after summer months with more regular sun exposure and somewhat lower by the end of winter, meaning a supplementation approach that produces adequate levels during summer months might prove somewhat less adequate by late winter without some seasonal adjustment. Discussing whether a seasonal dosing adjustment might be appropriate for your specific situation, particularly if you live somewhat further from the equator with more pronounced seasonal light variation, represents a genuinely individualized refinement worth exploring with your doctor rather than assuming a single, unchanging year-round dose is necessarily optimal for your specific geographic and lifestyle situation. Following several of these mistakes without realizing it, and are wondering whether they've essentially wasted years of effort and expense on a supplement that wasn't producing its intended benefit? While these mistakes genuinely can reduce vitamin D's effectiveness, they don't necessarily mean zero benefit was obtained, since even partial absorption and partial metabolic conversion still provide some degree of ongoing support, simply less than what would have been achieved with a more optimized approach. Rather than viewing this as wasted effort, consider this information as a genuine opportunity to meaningfully improve your approach going forward, discussing blood level testing with your doctor to establish your actual current status, and implementing the corrections discussed today to ensure your ongoing supplementation produces considerably more benefit moving forward than your previous approach may have provided. And what about people who've had their vitamin D levels tested and found them to be significantly low despite consistent supplementation, even after addressing several of today's common mistakes? This situation is worth discussing directly and specifically with your doctor, since persistently low levels despite reasonable supplementation and attention to the factors discussed today can sometimes indicate an underlying absorption issue, such as a digestive condition affecting fat absorption specifically, or in some cases, may simply indicate that your individual needs require a higher, medically supervised dose than typical general population recommendations, a determination best made through direct medical evaluation and monitoring, rather than general guidance alone. Let's also briefly mention how vitamin D connects to some of the other health topics discussed in other conversations, since it doesn't function in complete isolation from your broader health picture. As discussed in relation to muscle mass after 50, vitamin D also plays a role in muscle function and strength, meaning the corrections discussed throughout this video carry relevance beyond bone health specifically, potentially supporting the muscle maintenance goals discussed in other conversations as well. Similarly, vitamin D deficiency has been associated in some research with mood and cognitive concerns, meaning ensuring your vitamin D supplementation is genuinely effective, rather than undermined by the common mistakes discussed today, may carry relevance across several distinct areas of your overall health, beyond the bone-specific focus of today's particular discussion. Now let's summarize everything in a simple way. Taking vitamin D supplements after 50 involves several specific factors beyond simply remembering to take a pill consistently, including taking it alongside dietary fat to support proper absorption, ensuring adequate magnesium intake to support the metabolic conversion process, maintaining consistent rather than sporadic dosing, having your actual blood levels tested rather than assuming a standard dose is automatically appropriate, avoiding significantly excessive doses that carry genuine toxicity risk, ensuring adequate calcium intake alongside your vitamin D since these nutrients function together, and considering the less definitively established but reasonable role of vitamin K2, particularly for anyone taking higher doses. Addressing these factors together, rather than focusing on dosage alone, meaningfully improves the likelihood that your vitamin D supplementation is actually translating into the bone health benefit you're taking it for in the first place. But remember, the goal here isn't to feel that vitamin D supplementation is now unexpectedly complicated or intimidating, but rather to understand the specific, actionable factors that determine whether your existing effort is genuinely producing its intended benefit, allowing you to make a few thoughtful adjustments rather than needing to overhaul your entire approach or feel discouraged by the more nuanced picture discussed today. So with your very next dose, try one simple adjustment. Take it alongside a meal that includes some healthy fat rather than on an empty stomach, and consider scheduling a conversation with your doctor about checking your actual blood levels if you haven't done so recently, giving you genuine, individualized information rather than continuing to guess at whether your current approach is working as intended. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you had your vitamin D blood levels tested, and did any of today's common mistakes apply to how you've been taking your supplement? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story may help someone else watching this video reconsider their own approach to a supplement they've likely been taking without much additional thought. If this video helped you, please like, subscribe to Nutri, and turn on notifications so you don't miss more simple, practical health strategies for adults over 50. And next, watch our video on why you're breathing wrong after 50, and how to increase oxygen delivery to your brain, because small, correctable adjustments like these, whether in your supplements or your breathing, quietly determine whether your daily habits are genuinely supporting your long-term health as effectively as they could be.